Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Maveric Insights. This is a video podcast series where we discuss about all things bank tech. And as the name suggests, we talk about different trends that we are spotting. We talk about the different things we are seeing in the banking industry, the kind of technologies that are there, what are the needs of our customers. There are a lot of insights that we draw from there, and we are fortunate enough to have some of our leaders participate in this. Let's welcome Sriram. He's a strategic, business oriented, and very result focused professional with a very, very strong technical and business leadership acumen. And he has an extensive industry experience covering technology, solution, conversion, and delivery, predominantly in the digital development and quality engineering field of banking and financial services across different regions. So let's welcome Sriram.
Thank you. Thanks, Sinjini. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation because quality engineering is getting the attention that what it actually deserves, right? In my recent conversations with customers, I'm also seeing that it's getting to be a very evident trend that quality engineering is not seen as a cost center anymore, whereas, it has been looked as a strategic lever. And honestly, we are in a great inflection point, right? AI is creating a moment where technology, business outcomes, human judgment aren't looked to be very separate threads, these days or anymore, right? They are converging, they are colliding together in a very interesting way. I'm glad that we are talking about this. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I think that sets the background of sorts for my first question for you, which is quality engineering in banking has evolved, far beyond the traditional testing that we were doing earlier. So what do you see that banks are actually going through when it comes to testing and quality?
Let's start with a very simple observation, right? In most banks today, if you are actually looking at the shippable increments or the releases, right, don't get delayed because, teams can't run test, right? At some point in time, we thought that test automation will come back and then solve this problem. We automated bundles of test, in thousands and thousands, but still, there is an avenue of defect leakage that is happening into the production, right? Primarily they get delayed because teams can't agree on a confidence is something that I would say. When I say confidence, confidence in terms of what to test, confidence in terms of how to test, confidence in terms of calling out that nothing critical I have actually missed out, right? Because that's how banks are assembled today, right? The applications are actually assembled today. They are deeply interconnected, right? The customer journey cut across products, channels, regulation, legacy platforms, and whatnot, right? Small change, in one place can quietly go back and then break, something two or three hops away. And you will get to know about it, only when you say a production incident or a customer calls an IVR saying that it's not working, or when a regulator asks questions. So from that context, what I would say is banks don't have a problem with respect to the test execution. Rather, they actually have a problem with test intelligence.
Interesting. So, we are seeing AI being applied across different software development and the entire software development lifecycle. In fact, they're having their assistants and all of that. So, what shifts are you seeing in how AI is shaping QE?
Interesting. So, like as you said, AI is everywhere today, right? Almost every week, every month, there are models that are actually getting released and getting benchmarked against the software development, software engineering workbench, right? So, code generation is one of the area that is actually exploited, with respect to the intervention of AI. Right. Beyond code generation, I also see AI is playing a very vital role in terms of infra automation, self-healing pipelines to self-driving, right? So, but testing is very different, today, right? Especially banking and testing sits at the intersection of a domain knowledge, functional behavior, application nuances, risk and human judgment, right? While that actually talks about the complexity, of the banking system as such, I also feel that testing is the perfect candidate for AI, right? And is one of the most AI-ready disciplines that I would say. I say that for three simple reasons, right? One, if you actually look at it, testing runs on patterns, right? Past effects, fragile modules, vulnerable functions, recurring regressions, right? So these are rich signals for AI to consume and AI to learn from, right? Point number one. Point number two, if you're actually looking at most of the testing knowledge is actually undocumented, right? It lives in people's head, right? And when the people leave, the intelligence walks out along with them, right? Is the second thing. And third, testing decisions are very subjective, be it applying to a risk pattern, or to put it in simple terms, two teams can actually look at the same change in a very different way. The way that how I approach the testing may not be the same with how you approach the testing. So it becomes very, subjective. So from that context, I see A helps in, shifting this by codifying your domain knowledge, right? Reasoning across dependencies, understanding the risk propagation, blast radius, right? And acting like a virtual tester along with a human tester, right? I would actually call it as an ever-present buddy that who can actually stay along, along with a human tester to guide them and then provide that intelligence, a direction that we're have been actively working towards, where intelligent augments, human judgment rather than replacing it. And that's exactly Kiba is designed to do. So that way, if you look at it, AI is not replacing testers, but AI is amplifying decisioning, AI is amplifying judgment.
So, what I'm trying to understand is that, see, what you're saying is that AI, we are just not plugging assistants, yeah, in kind of smart assistants and all that. But there are also organizations which use, tools like Copilot or probably some kind of LLM wrappers, right, for testing. Now, what you're saying is that it needs a much more holistic approach, and if so, is that the reason why Kiba was designed? What was your thought process behind Kiba? Why Kiba?
Why Kiba? Yeah, everything starts with a why. I agree. So let me try to define what Kiba is, right? For the audience to understand. So Kiba is an AI native quality engineering platform built specifically for banking and the QA workflows and context, right? So and I want to stress that it is AI native and it's not AI enabled, right? Because we didn't build Kiba, to bolt AI into any of the existing workflows or the broken workflows. Rather, we built Kiba, because the way quality decisions are made today is a bit outdated, is the feel that what we had, right? So quality today reacts after a change happens, it comes late in the life cycle, right? But in a banking context, if you see, that's too late, for quality to come at a SIT phase or at a UIT phase. So we asked a very simple question to ourselves, right? What if we apply a quality thinking, right? What if the quality thinking starts the moment change enters into the system, right? That question is our why in terms of building Kiba. That's your first part of the question in terms of what is your why behind building Kiba. And what Kiba does is something like, it reimagines the QE from ground up, right? It embeds intelligence into how changes are actually being understood, how the risk is actually being assessed, and how the decisions are actually being made, not at the end of the life cycle, but at the very beginning, right? This is not about putting, or assembling everything together, as an automation activity, but the intent is to actually go back and then raise a quality bar for the systems, much early in the life cycle.
Mm. So, can you just talk about some of the platform features of Kiba?
How? That may need another podcast, for me to cover in detail, but,
Maybe the
you
top
know,
few,
uh,
if you could just talk about them.
yeah, let me attempt to cover at a very high level. Um, Good. So let me structure it this way, right? We will cover, Kiba platform in three tiers, right? One with respect to architectural view, two, with respect to what enterprise capabilities, that it has. because we are calling it as an enterprise platform, right? Governance have to be built in, right? So let's try to cover one by one at a very high level. So from an architecture standpoint, if you look at it, the platform's architecture is actually engineered in such a way to be highly modular, right? And API first is the principle that we actually adopted in terms of building this system. When I say highly modular, where core capabilities of this particular platforms are exposed as independent services through a secure QiBa gateway, enabling consumers to integrate them into their own chat interface, their own workflows, right? That is a flexibility that we actually wanted to offer. That's the first thing. When I say these services actually include, it can be a knowledge-based service, that is actually powered by semantic and knowledge grabs at the back end, right? And agentic services and presets, all designed to be consumed programmatically, rather than tightly getting coupled to the UI, right? This from architecture standpoint. And as a platform capability also, we also have an intuitive chat-based interface. We actually call it as a Maveric GPT, right? Not in another tool that the testers have to go back and then learn, but a very natural entry point into a best-in-class quality system, right? And from an enterprise and integration view, I think this is where practitioners would be, very excited to listen. It is designed for the real enterprise systems. When I say that, it connects seamlessly with tools like Jira, SharePoint, which day in, day out, the testers and test managers actually use in the real-time scenario. So it connects seamlessly with Jira, SharePoint, and our proprietary automation framework that is capable of doing UI, API, and mobile automation through secure gateways and APIs today, right? And we are also building integration for Confluence and Figma as a source channel for the knowledge ingestion, right? That is to the left. And ServiceNow and few of the observability platforms in the likes of Splunk, Datadog in the near future for your continuous and the closed loop feedback to come into the intelligence, right? So this from an enterprise standpoint, and because this is an enterprise platform, the governance has to be built in, right? Governance is actually looked at, three or four different forms. One, because it's a AI system, we will get started off with guardrails first, to prevent unsafe or any non-compliant, outputs in the likes of a jailbreak event or a prompt injection, right? And because we are in a very highly regulated industry in the likes of banking, right? There is a special focus with respect to the PII data, where we are very, very clear in terms of what to redact, what to refuse, and what to mask, right? So this governance is default built in into the platform. And okay, we are doing all of this, and what if the accuracy is not achieved, right? So the next thing is actually with respect to the relevancy factor, right? Where we are talking about the accuracy assurance, right? Through a deep evaluation framework, combining ground truth validation, right? Bringing in LLM as a judge model to continuously measure the relevance, correctness, faithfulness, kind of, parameters of AI. And it also brings in the best in class observability capability in terms of full logging and traceability, across the decisions that are actually made by the agents, right? These are three, governance things that we had in mind. And from the beginning, we were actually indexed to cost of operations and unit economics, right? So from that aspect, we have built a unit economics dashboard, which CXOs will really be interested in terms of knowing what is the AI usage, right? We really wanted to actually make it transparent and not as a black box. So from that context, we have built the platform thoughtfully, tastefully, and rightfully, right? I'm sure that it is actually going to be received positively by the people.
I have a follow-up question on this. See, there are already many coding assistants in the market that are available. So I want to ask you, where do these tools fall short?
This is a typical question. In other words, what customer actually asked me is, what's your USP, right? What is your differentiator? This is a very staple question that we actually hear from every customer interactions that we are actually making. Okay, but I would put it this way, right? So essentially, if we think about differentiator, right? We are at a David versus a Goliath or a generalist moment in AI, right? Most tools in the market are generalist or Goliaths, right? They are powerful, they are broad, They do many things in a single platform. They are built for scale, right? They are useful. I'm not commenting about that. They are needed too, right? On the other side, I have also seen platforms that rely on generic AI capability, right? Often LLM wrappers with very polished or a jazzy UI, right? Which we should forget it. We should not even spend time talking about it, right? And but here, if you see, QiBa plays a David role, right? Not by really being bigger, but really being precise, right? QiBa is domain native, built specifically for banking and quality engineering, and that distinction really matters, right? Because banking is not a problem of scale, right? Never a time, at least in my last 17, 18 years of experience, customers measured, the quality in terms of the volume of the test cases that I have executed, or how fast I have been able to go back and then execute a test case, right? But it was always about coverage, right? What is the coverage that we are actually giving, for the program that we are getting in? It's always about precision. It's always about context, right? So, for example, let's actually take, fund transfer flow, right? Which is a very typical payments use case that, people talk about. The importance of a payment remarks field, right? For a payment to go, or a payment to get blocked, or a payment to get hold, right? Beyond the application behavior, despite however the way that application is actually behaving, right? It has lot to do with the customer trust. It has to do lot to do with the fraud exposure, regulatory exposure, and a financial penalty if it is actually not implemented well, right? So from that aspect, I don't think so generic AI understand that, and I can confidently say, QiBa does. So from that context, that's why QiBa, I call it as a David in today's world. It is very focused, it's very context aware, it's intelligent by design, right? While still delivering uh, enterprise grade quality, security, governance, and control. So, if you ask me, my personal opinion in the race of AI, right? Davids will actually see more success than generalists and Goliaths, and the recent AI investments across the globe is the testimony for this.
Okay, so precision and context are very, very important, and obviously in the
That's
banking
where we will ride
industry.
upon.
Correct,
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Especially, I think that also aligns perfectly with, our positioning and what we really stand for, right, in Maverick. So that is
Especially, we have
also
always been a David last 25 years. So we told
right.
that we will only work with one domain and we will get deeper into it. So that's a natural DNA of Maverick. Yeah.
Correct. So another question that I've been thinking is that, any traditional testing kind of approach would have a very checklist kind of an approach, right? How would it be different from what we are seeing with the virtual tester today?
Interesting. Mm, mm. Okay. Um, Test automation is not new, right? For the last decades, test automation has been largely prescriptive and rule based, like what exactly you said, right? Scripts follow fixed steps, fixed assertions, fixed element locators, right? Almost like a checklist, right? It's a pre-scripted story that someone else was actually executing on behalf of us, right? Modern automation, tools we should acknowledge they have actually evolved multifold, right? But mostly in the narrowed bands of intelligence, I would say, right? Few of them are coming back and then claiming that I will be able to generate scripts faster using an LCNC platform. I'll be able to do, execution faster during the parallel threading, and parallel execution, auto hailing locators, improving UI stability, right? And your playwrights and seleniums of the world or any similar tools are still fundamentally focusing on execution and not on reasoning, right? Are these useful? Definitely yes. At some point in time we would also pivot to some of these tools with respect to the execution capability. But what's missing is actually the intelligence before execution, right? Intelligence that actually understands the banking context, the intent of the change impact, the risk propagation, right? And that's a role that I see that virtual tester play will come in, and then it plays a vital role in terms of reasoning and adapting. So to put it in a concluding way, I would say automation answers you how fast, and virtual tester answers what matters to be tested. So it's a good and a powerful combo.
And since you're talking about, the prediction quotient being there, so obviously the retests and all of that also would have come down, right? Quite a bit
Ex-
because of that.
Exactly, exactly.
So tell me, of course, this is one of the things, parameters, but when you meet customers, right, I'm sure they want to know about what is the outcome that it can promise. What are the different, how is it going to help or enable a CIO in his business journey? So, what are the different kind of things? How does it bring that business value? Can you talk about that, or even how teams are should be looking at it? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I'll put it in this perspective, right? QiBa delivers outcomes that are both measurable, right, and defensible, right, in terms of quality and as well as on velocity, right? Let's think about who is the immediate consumer of this particular platform, right? My immediate consumers of this particular platforms are actually going to be testing teams, correct? From that context, let's see what testing team will gain visibility into, right? So I could tell probably, they will have an acceptance criteria, quality and completeness, right? They will be able to have a very objective-led conversations with business and POs, right? A lot of ping pongs between your POs, developers and testers can actually get arrested, right? So test coverage completeness, importantly, a risk-based regression scope. You are very clear that this is what I'm actually going to execute. I will not be looking at 10,000 test cases of my pack. Rather, this change can actually get certified by running 10% of that. It's a kind of a confidence that you will have, right? And importantly, with respect to the continuous feedback loop, right, on what is actually happening in the real world production and how that particular feedback comes into your test planning, and further to the rest of the test life cycle. This with respect to the team where they will actually gain visibility into, right? And if you look at the other persona, from a CXO standpoint, what this really means is they will gain proactive risk visibility, right? And no last minute surprises. That's one. And they will see a lean regression cycles, lowering both cost and as well as effort, right? And uh, a predictable and accelerated release certification, overall with respect to the program timeline, and a data-driven confidence, for a go-live approval, right? Which is again being very subjective today. So all of this are actually happening not because we are testing more. It is actually happening because we test what really matters, right? So from that context, these are all the benefits or the outcomes that I could actually think about.
Mm. But still, there would be a little percentage where probably we'll have to kind of, adapt at the last minute because obviously things are changing very fast and all of that, right? So that will, any which ways, be there.
That will continue because we are very clear that this is actually not going to replace AI testers. That was my first statement, right? We are far away from there.
Okay. So, how can testing teams practically adopt this kind of an AI first mindset? Because they've been doing traditional testing for a long time. So, what would be your uh, few, recommendations?
Okay. Let me reflect back on my own, last 3 month story with QiBa. This is a great opportunity that I have actually got here, right? But one thing that I have actually realized, over the last few months, in terms of building QiBa together as a team, right? We have made meaningful progress, right? But I can tell you that barely we have scratched the surface. There is a lot to do, right? That is one. So A gives us a chance to fundamentally rethink quality engineering, not to just go back and then improve it on incremental basis. So from that context, my message to the team would be, start exploring, start questioning the old assumptions that you are actually making, day in, day out. Uh, Start partnering with the AI, not fearing it, right? And what is one thing that you should really go back and then invest on is prompt engineering, right? Uh, Writing clear, thoughtful, well curated, structured prompts, you know, that can do so much of heavy lifting in your day to day work. That's my personal, learning that what I actually had in the last 3 months. So, at the minimum, right, for them to get an AI native mindset into their day to day work, at minimum, every one of us needs to be a prompt writer, if not a prompt engineer, but definitely. And you should ideally not be looking at this as a specialist role, right, or a supplementing role, but as a core skill, like how you go back and then write good emails, clear requirements and effective test cases. So that's a great start, for anyone to get started off with.
Okay. And I think one last question, which is on a lot of people's mind, how does the future look for testers with the rise of the virtual tester?
Okay, okay. The future isn't about fully autonomous testing overnight. Not that AI is actually going to go back and then test, and we are going to ship the code into prod, right? So it cannot happen overnight. Of course, it's a natural evolution. It will happen. Some of the staple workflows can actually be done that way, right? There are huge possibilities which we are also exploring. Um, but I would say it's about collaboration, right? Human testers bring um, judgment, human testers bring accountability, human testers bring deep domain intuition, right? And that is looking to be indispensable, right? So whatever you are actually doing today, get into the depth of it, and then understand the domain part of it, right? So that is going to really come back and then get integrated, augmented to AI. That will be the human tester's responsibility, and virtual testers will actually bring memories of the past, right? Good reasoning ability, right? Consistency, and yeah, why not scale? So, virtual testers will talk about memory, reasoning, consistency, and scale. Together, they actually form a very powerful model, right? So, over time, if you actually see, QE professionals will spend less time in terms of writing test cases, executing test cases, right? Rather, they will actually look at curating the intelligence. They will start reviewing insights, they will start validating risk, right, and become true domain experts. So they will focus on very high value added task in the test life cycle. So I would say it's not a loss of role, but it's a promotion of a role, right? It's a natural evolution, that actually people will get into. With respect to the test design, as you rightly said, right, we will still stick to the underlying test principles in terms of how comprehensively should I actually go back and then look at testing, and how optimally should I go back and then look at the testing. The same rule of your rule of one and rule of n, will actually apply. I can generate n number of test cases, for a comprehensiveness, but still we are not into a maturity level, even though we are able to go back and then design those amount of test cases, but your execution, will still, look to be a bottleneck. As it actually enters into your scope, then you will, you know, uh, get mounted on that pressure in terms of going back and then executing it. So from that context, uh, we should still stick to, the basic discipline of what it exactly takes to go back and then test, and not look at actually creating abundance, of test. In fact, QiBa will actually double down, on the domain experts knowledge that what we actually have today, right, with respect to the multiple business clients, that we would operate. Of course, there are, rich embedding models that are very specific to, BFSI sector, that where we would be able to pivot on in terms of, doing the first 70% in terms of curating that particular knowledge base. SMEs will come back and then complete the remaining 30% and as well as review the 70%, as a first one-time activity, when we are actually looking at creating these knowledge base and knowledge graphs. That's why I told that domain expertise is actually not going anywhere. You may need to further get deep into whatever the domain that you are working on. No, there is no red signal for AI, right? In my experience, at least, every possible QE workflow can be well integrated with the AI. But if it is actually carefully designed in terms of when HEMA can actually get in as a human in the loop to go back and then validate that, right? When you give full autonomy, what you are actually saying is right. But definitely, we are not talking about autonomous QE except for certain staple workflows in terms of either understanding the user story to go back and then convert into the design. But before the scope gets finalized, for whatever you are designing, definitely, Hema, your expertise would ideally be required to go back and then review that.
Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of today's discussion. I hope it was insightful for all of you. And thank you so much, Sriram, for taking out time from your busy, hectic schedule and really spending so much time with us, trying to help us understand what Kiva is all about and all about testing and this entire world of how things are shaping up here. So thank you so much.
Thank you.